November 1942. The heart of winter in the Pyrenees. Imagine the coldest you've ever been. Now add Nazi patrols hunting you, constant paranoia, and the small fact that you are crossing some of Europe's highest peaks on foot. Now imagine doing all that with a prosthetic leg made of wood and metal. Every step is agony. The cold seeps into the stump. The awkward gait threatens to give you away with every crunch of snow. Behind her, the Gestapo, under the command of the brutal Klaus Barbie, are turning Lyon upside down, desperate to capture the woman they call the Limping Lady. They know she's their biggest headache in France, the mastermind behind a massive resistance network, and they want her bad. And right now, stranded between occupied France and neutral Spain, she is one slip-up away from torture and execution. Her radio operator has already been captured. She is alone. The only thing keeping her going is sheer, unadulterated audacity, and a wooden leg she affectionately named Cuthbert. Will Cuthbert hold out? Will she freeze before the Germans find her? We'll get back to that terrifying mountain pass, because to understand how an American socialite ended up as the most dangerous of all Allied spies, we have to go back before the war, before the leg, when Virginia Hall was just a woman too stubborn to take no for an answer. Virginia Hall was born in 1906 in Baltimore, Maryland, into a life of privilege that she seemed determined to ignore. Her family was wealthy, but Virginia wasn't interested in debutante balls or finding a suitable husband to settle down with. She was, by all accounts, a tomboy before the term was even fully accepted. She loved horseback riding, hunting, and anything that involved getting outside and breaking the rules for young ladies of her class. She was also incredibly smart. She attended top-tier colleges, Radcliffe and Barnard, studied in Europe, and became fluent in French, German, and Italian. She had ambition. She wanted to work in diplomacy, to be a foreign service officer for the United States. In the 1930s, this was an audacious dream for a woman. The State Department was, to put it mildly, a bit of a boys' club. Has that really changed? She applied. She took the exams. She passed them with flying colors. And then she was told, quite bluntly, that women could only serve as clerk typists. Basically, thanks for the application, sweetie, but why don't you run along and make the coffee while the men handle the global politics? Imagine the fury. This brilliant, driven, multilingual woman was dismissed because of her gender. It was a rejection that would have crushed many people. But for Virginia Hall, it just fueled the fire. If the U.S. government wouldn't let her serve her country with her mind, she'd find another way. She quit her clerical job and moved to Europe, working in various U.S. embassies in minor roles, still hoping for a break. But first, tragedy struck, and it would change the course of her life and World War II history forever. In 1933, while working at the U.S. Embassy in Turkey, Virginia went on a hunting trip. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway. Instead, as she was getting out of a car, her shotgun accidentally discharged. The blast hit her left leg below the knee. In the rural Turkey of the 1930s, medical care was limited and gangrene set up quickly. To save her life, the doctors had no choice. They had to amputate the leg below the knee. Pause and think about that. Your entire world, your identity as an active, sporty, independent person is shattered in a second. This is 1933. Disability wasn't just a physical challenge, it was a social stigma. Virginia Hall was devastated, yes. For months, her life hung in the balance. When she finally recovered, she had to face a new reality. She was sent home to Baltimore to heal, and she faced another rejection. The State Department, apparently not satisfied with their initial sexism, now cited her disability as a reason she could never be a Foreign Service officer. According to their rules, no person with a prosthetic limb can serve as a diplomat. Because apparently you need 2 organic feet to argue about trade agreements. This is where the audacity really kicks in. Did she give up? Did she accept the desk job and fade away? Absolutely not. She got fitted for a state-of-the-art, for the 30s, prosthetic leg. It was made of aluminum and wood, a heavy, noisy, awkward apparatus, and she decided to own it. She named it Cuthbert. Why Cuthbert? Who knows? Maybe it sounded appropriately stuffy and British, which would have come in handy later. But giving it a name was her way of taking control. It wasn't a disability, it was a tool. It was her new partner. And Virginia Hall was determined that neither the State Department nor Cuthbert was going to stop her. Fast forward to 1940. War had broken out. France had fallen to the Nazis. Britain was standing alone, expecting an invasion. The world was at its darkest point. And Virginia Hall, back in Europe, was working as an ambulance driver for the French army after they'd been defeated, just trying to help however she could. When the U.S. finally entered the war after Pearl Harbor, she tried, yet again, to join the regular U.S. war effort. And yet again, she was turned down due to her disability. This is where Virginia, perhaps fueled by gin and a lot of righteous anger, decided to look elsewhere. She needed an organization as audacious as she was. An organization that didn't care about regulations or gender or whether you had all your limbs as long as you were brave, smart, and could kill a Nazi. She found the SOE. The Special Operations Executive was Britain's newly formed, highly secret organization. Their mission, ordered directly by Winston Churchill, was to set Europe ablaze. This was not traditional warfare. This was espionage, sabotage, subversion. They were tasked with parachuting agents into occupied territory to organize resistance groups, blow up trains, gather intelligence, and generally wreak havoc behind enemy lines. The SOE didn't have the luxury of State Department sexism or regulations. They needed people who spoke French, who knew the terrain, and who had steel nerves. A female recruiter with a limp? In traditional espionage, a physical tell is a disaster. But Virginia Hall argued her case. A disabled woman? Who would suspect her? She could pass herself off as a harmless civilian, a journalist, anything but a British agent. They were impressed by her. They trained her. They taught her wireless radio operation, code breaking, and how to use explosives and various weapons. They noted she was a good shot, even with her disability. Cuthbert, the aluminum leg, went through SOE training too. Hey, if you're enjoying these stories, do me a favor and support independent history storytelling by hitting that subscribe button. Done it? Awesome. Let's get back to the story. In August 1941, Virginia Hall became the SOE's first female agent sent into occupied France. She landed not by parachute, that would be difficult with Cuthbert, but by boat at night on the south coast. Her destination was Lyon. Lyon was the heart of the Free Zone, part of France nominally governed by the collaborationist Vichy French regime, but heavily monitored and controlled by the Gestapo. Lyon was a dangerous, paranoid city. Everyone was watching everyone. Virginia's cover story? She was Marie Monin, an American journalist working for the New York Post. This was brilliant. It gave her a reason to ask questions, travel, and meet people without raising immediate suspicion. Plus, as a neutral American citizen, before Pearl Harbor, she had a certain level of protection. Her mission was not to lead a resistance army, but something even harder, to build one. She was the organizer, the network builder. She started small. She recruited helpers, a gynecologist who let her use her office as a dead drop for messages, a brothel owner who passed on information overheard from high-ranking German officers. Those were always interesting reports. She established safe houses. She set up a reliable system for SOE agents to drop in by parachute or land by boat. She coordinated drops of supplies, money, and wireless radios. And she did all this while managing Cuthbert. Lyon is a city of hills. Imagine constant, painful walking, maintaining your balance on cobblestones, and the constant fear that someone would notice your gait and realize who you were. She used disguises constantly. The elegant American journalist would vanish, replaced by a milkmaid, dressed in tattered clothes, her hair dyed gray, a hunched back, all to hide her limp, or an elderly woman selling vegetables in the market. She was a master of evasion. Her reports back to London, sent via clandestine wireless radio, were vital. They contained intelligence on German troop movements, industrial production, and the effectiveness of Allied bombing. London was amazed. Her network was becoming the most efficient, largest, and most reliable in all of France. And she did it all with a damn heavy wooden leg and a sense of humor that kept her team going. When asked in one of her reports how Cuthbert was handling the stairs in Lyon, she dryly responded, "He complains of the damp, but we've oiled his joints, and he's still operational." Of course, when you're building a resistance network in a spy-infested city, tension is constant. Close calls were inevitable, and one such scene in 1942 has become part of the Audacious Hall legend. A moment where her life hung in the balance and she relied on pure brass ovaries to survive. She was meeting with one of her top recruiters, a man named Gustav, at a small cafe to receive a critical list of safe houses. In mid-conversation, the cafe door opened, and in walked two Vichy French policemen on a random patrol. They started checking identity papers. Gustav froze. The list, written on thin, edible paper, was hidden inside a pack of cigarettes on the table. Virginia, as Marie, didn't blink. She was disguised as a simpler French woman that day, not the journalist. The police reached their table. "Your papers, please," one of them said. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. Virginia smiled weakly, her face composed in a mask of harmless, middle-aged French respectability. She searched her bag, making a show of being slightly clumsy, mumbling to herself about losing my damn head. The second policeman, younger and more suspicious, was eyeing her leg, which was visible beneath the table. Cuthbert was aluminum and wood, and sometimes, if it wasn't aligned right, it made a tiny, muffled clack noise against the floor, which it just did. The young cop's eyes narrowed. "Madame, is something wrong with your leg?" This was it. This was the moment Cuthbert would betray her. Virginia looked down at her leg, then up at the cop, her expression changing instantly from flustered civilian to one of deep, agonizing personal embarrassment. She sighed dramatically, the picture of a woman having her most private misery exposed. "Oh, monsieur, I apologize," she said, leaning in and whispering with staged, managed shame, ensuring the entire cafe could privately hear her. "Since the war, getting the right undergarments is impossible. The elastic is terrible. It's my damn corset. It's always shifting and making the strangest noises against my hip." She patted her hip area significantly, wincing as if in pain. "It's very painful, and so public." She looked away, pretending to be utterly mortified. She literally blamed the noise of her prosthetic leg on a faulty corset causing an embarrassing chafing problem. Gustav played along, adding, "It's true, officers. My poor aunt's corset has been giving her hell for months." The first policeman, visibly uncomfortable with this sudden, very female medical overshare, blushed. The idea of public, painful, female undergarment issues was not something he wanted to investigate. "Yes, well, just have your papers next time." He backed away from the table, gesturing for the young cop to move on. As they left, Virginia calmly retrieved the cigarette pack, which the policeman had fortunately decided not to open after her performance. She had used a deeply unfeminine, embarrassing medical problem, and the simple word damn, very out of character for the persona she was playing, to gross out the suspicious cop and save her network. Audacity? Hell yes! But the net was tightening. In 1942, the Nazis fully occupied the Free Zone, including Lyon. The Gestapo, led by the infamous and brutal Klaus Barbie, were furious. They knew a major Allied intelligence network was operating under their noses, and they knew it was run by a woman. They called her the Limping Lady. Barbie, a man known for torturing children, was obsessed with her. She became the Gestapo's most wanted Allied agent in France. Wanted posters with a vague description of her limp and potential disguises went up across the region. A friend in the police warned her that her capture was imminent. Every wireless radio message she sent was a massive risk of being tracked by German direction-finding bands. Her network was being compromised, one by one. The SOE ordered her to flee, which brings us back to the Pyrenees. Her escape path was one of the few remaining rat lines to Spain. It was grueling, especially for an agent, and doing it with a prosthetic leg was impossible. Her contact in Spain sent her a radio message. Hope Cuthbert doesn't object to the walking. Virginia Hall's radio response, now legendary, was, "Cuthbert is tired, but we can't keep the Nazis waiting." And so began the impossible journey we saw at the start. She hiked for days in waist-deep snow in a winter blizzard, crossing some of the highest passes. She was in excruciating, blinding pain from the friction of her stump against Cuthbert. The leg was a liability, making every step slow, unstable, and noisy. At times, her guides had to almost carry her, but she refused to stop. She was more afraid of being captured by Barbie than of the mountains. After a final, agonizing push, she crossed the border and surrendered to Spanish police. She was immediately thrown into a terrible, freezing Spanish jail as an undocumented alien. Spain was neutral, but fascist and pro-German. Even from jail, her audacity didn't fade. She managed to use a small bribe and her clever mind to get a message to the U.S. consulate, who finally secured her release months later. She was safe. The Gestapo had lost her. But Virginia Hall, the Limping Lady, was just getting started. After her escape, the SOE, realizing she was too well known in the Gestapo to return to France safely, kept her in London. But Virginia was bored. She wanted back in. The war was nearing its climax, and D-Day was being planned. The resistance in France needed to be reorganized and supported for the final fight. London refused her request. So Virginia Hall, ever pragmatic, went to the Americans. She transferred to the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, the brand new American intelligence agency that would later become the CIA. The OSS, less concerned with old British rules, heard her plan and gave her a mission. In March 1944, just months before the D-Day landings, Virginia Hall returned to France. Not by boat, but by parachute. Imagine jumping from a low-flying plane at night with a wooden leg strapped to your torso, and then having to reattach it while in a dark field, knowing Gestapo patrols could be anywhere. This was pure insanity. Her new code name was Diane, and she was sent into central France. Her job, again, was to be a Jedburgh, an OSS agent tasked with organizing, arming, and coordinating resistance groups, known as the Maquis, to attack German lines of communication and supply. This time, her disguise was even more daring. The elegant, multilingual American journalist was gone. She was now Philomene, an elderly, somewhat senile peasant woman. She dyed her hair gray, wore tattered clothes, and practiced walking with an even worse limp to mask her genuine one. She bought a small herd of cows and lived in a tiny, dilapidated barn, using the cattle as a cover to travel the roads selling milk and cheese. She was invisible. Who would suspect this harmless old woman? Her operation was an astounding success. She coordinated dozens of parachute drops of arms and ammunition. She organized Maquis groups totaling over 1,500 fighters. She taught them sabotage and guerrilla tactics. Her network blew up railway lines, cut telephone wires, ambushed German convoys, and generally made life hell for the occupation. After D-Day, her forces was so effective that they essentially cleared the region of German troops on their own, allowing the advancing Allied armies to move much faster. In her reports, which she sent using a wireless radio hidden inside an old cowbell, she nonchalantly reported things like, blew up 5 bridges, captured 140 prisoners, Maquis in high spirits, all is well. She continued her work, often in direct combat with retreating German forces, until the liberation of France in August 1944. After the war, Virginia Hall finally got the recognition she deserved. The U.S. military awarded her the Distinguished Service Cross, the highest second award for valor. It was the only one awarded to a civilian woman in World War II. She also received a private, quiet commendation from President Harry Truman. She was a national hero. But Virginia Hall was never one to rest. When the OSS was disbanded and replaced by the newly formed CIA, Virginia Hall was one of its first recruits, becoming an official recognized career staff officer in 1947. She worked in the CIA service for the rest of her life, focusing on anti-communist operations during the Cold War. She never talked about her wartime exploits. To her neighbors and colleagues, she was just a quiet, dedicated professional with a slight limp. Her story was classified for decades. It was only after her death that the full extent of her bravery and audacity was revealed. Virginia Hall died in 1982. She had faced dismissal, sexism, and a life-shattering injury. She had been hunted by the most brutal organization in history. She had crossed mountains on a wooden leg and parachuted into a war zone as a senile old woman. She did all of it not for glory, but because she was too stubborn to accept defeat. Her audacity changed history, and her story reminds us that sometimes the most effective weapon in the world isn't a bomb or a gun. It's a woman with a damn heavy wooden leg who refuses to back down. The next time you're facing a challenge that seems impossible, think of Virginia Hall and Cuthbert crossing the Pyrenees. Her life is a masterclass in resilience, resourcefulness, and the power of pure, unadulterated audacity. What's the biggest historical comeback story you know? Tell me in the comments below. And if you're ready for more stories of the bold, the difficult, and the downright dangerous, please remember to subscribe and like this video. I'll be back in a bit with another chapter from Audacious History. Thanks for watching, and stay audacious.